Doc Rivers said some real out-of-pocket things in the media lately. We're going to cover everything in today's Amateur TV video. Thank you so much for joining me on this channel as we get it revamped to bring you more NBA content in unison with the Amateur Sports channel. We have almost 9,000 subscribers. We're starting this one up again, so thank you so much for supporting. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoy what you see from today's video, and consider subscribing for more NBA content from myself with consistent uploads here. But today, we want to talk about Doc Rivers. He was asked recently by some media personnel. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the video. I'm sure you've seen a clip at this point. But he was asked by media personnel about the fact that he's blown 3 different 3-1 series leads in his career as an NBA head coach. So I think people have the right to ask about that in the midst. The Raptors are halfway through coming back from 3-0 down. And obviously, they got a big job to do tonight in Game 6 in order to make that happen. But they've won 2 games. So naturally, people are going to ask Doc Rivers about his previous coaching collapses. And Doc Rivers, the answer he gave was absolutely not what I was expecting one for him to give. I'm not going to play the clip because I'm sure you've seen it, but we're going to talk about some of the quotes here. So, for starters, he says it's easy to use me as an example. I mean, yeah, you've blown 3 different 3-1 series leads. Easy to use me as an example. I wish y'all would tell the whole story with me. My Orlando team was an 8 seed, so in 2003, Orlando were up 3-1 on the Pistons. They were up 3-1. They were the 8 seed over the 1 seed, and they actually ended up losing 3 games in a row. That was the first time he blew a 3-1 series lead. Then he goes about his Clippers team. So in 2015, when they're down 3-1, they're up 3-1. Chris Paul wasn't there in the first 2 games and apparently wasn't fully healthy. And we didn't have home court. Look at all these excuses from Doc Rivers. And then in 2020, he actually thinks he blew that one. So the other ones weren't that bad. We all know the 2021, the Clippers were up 3-1 on the Nuggets in the bubble. And he actually blamed that one on it being in the bubble because they didn't have home court. I mean, nobody had home court in that one. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense for Doc Rivers to divert to that. And another good quote from it is Doc Rivers said about his playoff collapses, "It just happens." Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't just happen. Because in this 75-year history of the NBA, I don't know if throughout that entire history, they've always been 7-game series. Regardless, in the history of the NBA, a 3-1 series lead has been blown 13 different times. Doc Rivers has done it 3 times on his own as a coach. That equates to 23% of all 3-1 series leads blown in NBA history. And Doc Rivers also is the only coach to have done it more than once, yet he has done it 3 times. So naturally, people are going to be asking questions regarding this specific topic. He has to expect that. And honestly, he was extremely pressed talking about this stuff, and he was blaming all these things and took just a slight amount of blame for the Clippers in 2020 when they blew the lead to the Denver Nuggets. Now, Doc Rivers can think all these things. What is he doing saying this right now? It is very clear to me that the 76ers organization, from the top down, like you see with Doc Rivers here, they are panicking about the Raptors being 3-2 in this series right now. They are so worried. Doc Rivers is so worried. I mean, how is Doc Rivers? He was listed as a top 15 NBA coach of all time. Like, how the hell have we gotten to that point? For a guy who is barely 500 in games where he can close out a series, that is just absolutely ridiculous. Honestly, I can't believe he's listed that high. And to say things like this, like, there are Orlando guys, like guys from the Orlando Magic team in 2003. All these guys are retired, chilling at home, like 50 years old, minding their own business. And then their phone blows up because Doc Rivers is throwing them under the bus, essentially saying that team was trash. It was a miracle that I even got that team to a 3-1 series lead. It was a miracle coaching job from me. How can Doc Rivers be doing this? These are the type of things that you say once the series is done. You don't have to worry about blowing it because, like, obviously, the Sixers are still the huge favorite to win this series over the Raptors. But you can't excuse the possibility. And Doc Rivers really can't be talking like this and really needs to keep his cool for the 76ers because honestly, like you can sense Joel Embiid calling out James Harden, which we covered in the previous video on this channel, and now Doc Rivers throwing his former teams under the bus all these years later. That's a problem for the Sixers. Sixers fans, this is a really bad look. I'm not really sure how Sixers fans feel about Doc Rivers. I don't imagine they're terrific fans of Doc Rivers, and if they are, my big question would be why, but this is so out of pocket for Doc Rivers to say. Like, let's take a look at this 2003 team. Let's take a look at the Orlando Magic here. So he was talking about how it was a miracle they were up. And sure, you know what? Granted, this is the Pistons in 2003. They were a good team, and you won 3 of the first 4 games. Then, like, in Game 5, you score 67 points. And this is a team with T-Mac, who averaged 32 points in this season. 67 points in a playoff game is pretty embarrassing, but you still have two more. You have still two more to get it back. You're at home in game 6 to close it out. You lose by 15. And then you go to Detroit, try to win game 7. You also lose by 15. So you lost big time in all 3 of those games where you close out the series. We got to talk about the coaching there a little bit. But, things can happen. Like, crazy comebacks can absolutely happen. Like, they're bound to happen at some point over the course of history. But yeah, this is the only coach where it's happened to more than once. So let's go to the 2015 series. So Chris Paul was injured for 2 of the games, and apparently he was playing on one leg. The Clippers, they go up 3-1 in this series. We're not going to talk about either James Harden and his impact on this series with injuries, but we go to games 5, 6, and 7 here, where the Rockets win all 3. And again, none of these games are within 10 points. It's not like, a bounce doesn't go their way or whatnot. Like, they got dominated. Like, when this series is at the point, and we're at this point in the Raptors series, where you've really figured out your opponent and your game plan just needs to be superior to the other coach a lot of time. And if it isn't, if it's very equal, then some bounces are just bound to go your way. But it's very clear here, and in the previous series, like, they got blown out in 3 straight games in both the 2003 series and the 2015 series when Doc Rivers was a coach. They had no chance in games 5, 6, or 7. Now, let's go to the 2020 series, the one that he actually blew, unlike the other ones. So, obviously, the Clippers go up 3-1 on the Nuggets. And granted, Game 5 was close. And then you go to games 6 and 7 where it wasn't close. Again, 2 double-digit losses. So, of the 3-1 series leads that Doc Rivers has blown, by the way, again, the only coach who have done it more than once. He's done it 3 times. In 8 of the 9 games where they could have closed out the series, they lost by more than 10 points. I don't care what the personnel is on your team. That is just not good enough from a coaching perspective. And honestly, if this was further in the future where Doc Rivers could throw Kawhi and Paul George under the bus for the way they played in those closeout games in the Denver series, he would have done it. If it was further in the future, he's going to do it. He is going to do it one day. He only doesn't do it because they're still in the league and they're still playing against him. Believe me, he wants to do it. And I'm sure in private, Doc Rivers calls out Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to, close associates who aren't going to reveal that sort of information. Like, I am sure of that. Like, they let Murray and Jokic run an absolute mockery of that team. That was a blow-on. But apparently, it was in the bubble. So anything can really happen in the bubble. Things happen for sure. They happen once to everybody else, not 3 different times. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, sure, there can be excuses for this. Doc Rivers wants to protect his precious reputation. Sure, we can do all of that. But to say these things in the middle of a series, like that you're winning still, it is just a sign of somebody who is kind of panicking. And I'm going to talk about Nick Nurse here. Like, has Nick Nurse ever made an excuse about things not going his way? Like, Nick Nurse has been through, like, every level of coaching here. Like, I'm sure he's seen some outrageous stuff. Like his teams in England only having like 4 players available, or like maybe one game where, oh yeah, we didn't have anybody available to play, so I just hopped in there and played. Like, he used to actually be a player coach. Nick Nurse has gone through all these things, and could you imagine Nick Nurse blaming people? Like, could you imagine Nick Nurse throwing Siakam under the bus for that series in 2020 against the Celtics? Like, that's something that Doc Rivers clearly would do because he's shown examples of throwing people under the bus in the past. Doing that in the middle of the series is just absolutely insane to me. Same for Joel Embiid throwing James Harden under the bus in a series that they're winning. Like, it's just the culture is all off there. And, all this noise about comebacks and stuff could all be put to bed if the Sixers just win Game 6 tonight. And they're fully capable of doing that 100%. I think that Game 7 is their better chance, but 100%. They could win Game 6, and all of this conversation could be put to bed. And Doc Rivers did eventually say, let's just win that. Let's just win that Game 6, and we just don't have to worry about it. And that makes sense. That absolutely does make sense. But this is not the type of things that you should be saying at this point in the series. So you absolutely should not be talking like this. This doesn't give the right vibe to fans. It doesn't give the right vibe to the players. Like, he should have just said, like, we had, like, those things, those records, they have nothing to do with this current team that we have right now. This team is different. This team is going to get it done. If we don't get it done against the Raptors in Game 6, we're going to get it done in game 7. That's how we should be treating it. We're focused on winning a game here. We're not focused about the pass at all. That's what a proper coach should do in this situation. That is a really bad look for Doc Rivers. And Sixers fans really shouldn't be happy with that from him as a coach there, because he's not giving off the right vibe. The organization, there is a sense of panic, fans booing them at home, fans leaving with 4 minutes left in not necessarily a blowout in game 5. Joel Embiid throwing James Harden under the bus and Doc Rivers under the bus. Doc Rivers throwing his former teams under the bus. It's a really bad look. You can tell that the 76ers are really worried about this situation. So I think with that culture off, Raptors, much better culture, playing at home. Let's hope they get it done in game 6. There's a full breakdown pretty much on Amateur Sports, my main channel, but I just wanted to add in some stuff on Doc Rivers. That's really the point of this channel here. I have my main channel that I talk, everything Raptors, but there's just some things I feel like I don't want to put on the main channel, but I still want to get my opinion out there. I just feel such a burning passion to talk about these things that I want to do it still. I want to have more places where I can talk basketball. That's why I've set up this channel. So if you enjoyed this one, make sure to drop a like and also consider subscribing. I'm going to do consistent uploads here. The quality isn't going to be as good as Amateur Sports. I'm going to admit that, but I'm still going to be real with all of my takes, and I'm going to give you the best content that I possibly can, given my schedule, putting out 4 videos a week in Amateur Sports, working a 9-to-5 job, and streaming 3 to 4 times a week. I love doing this stuff, and if you want to continue to support, make sure you keep it locked with Amateur TV.